Okay, so today we're diving into a story about a country that's facing this really critical conservation paradox. I mean, on one hand, it's a place of just breathtaking natural beauty, but on the other, it's become ground zero for a super complex and, honestly, frustrating problem, the fight for wildlife justice.
So our story starts in Bangladesh. And, for a relatively small, super populous country, it is just bursting with life. It's an absolutely vital habitat for some of the world's most iconic species. We're talking the majestic Bengal tiger, of course, but also countless migratory birds that literally travel across continents just to be there. It's pretty incredible.
But here's where that paradox really hits you. This amazing biodiversity hotspot has also become a major hub for the illegal wildlife trade. And it's not just a place where animals are poached from. No, it's a key transit route for these massive trafficking networks, moving animal parts all across Asia and even further.
And that really sets up our central question, right? Because Bangladesh has some of the most comprehensive wildlife protection laws you'll find anywhere in the world. So why isn't it working? Why is the problem getting worse? Why is wildlife justice failing so badly? Let's dig in.
All right, Section 1. To really get our heads around this paradox, we have to start by looking at the law itself. And it's this impressive legal fortress that Bangladesh has built to protect its natural heritage. Seriously, on paper, it looks almost impenetrable. This timeline really shows you something important. This isn't a new thing. It reveals this clear, decades-long commitment. It kicks off right after independence in 1973. Then in 2011, conservation gets elevated to a constitutional duty. Think about that. And it all culminates in this really powerful 2012 Wildlife Act. So you can see this wasn't some afterthought. It was a very deliberate, step-by-step legal evolution.
And this commitment, it isn't just a domestic thing, not at all. Bangladesh is a signatory to all 5 of the major international wildlife treaties, what some people call the Big Five: CITES, CBD, all of them. By signing on, they've basically made a promise to the whole world that they're going to protect endangered species, biodiversity, and these critical habitats inside their borders. And the law gets super specific, especially that 2012 Act. It lays out these really severe penalties that are tiered depending on the animal. So, for example, killing a tiger or an elephant could land you in prison for up to 7 years, plus a huge fine. The intention here is crystal clear: create a massive deterrent to protect the country's most vulnerable and iconic species.
Okay, so with a legal fortress this strong, you gotta ask, where are the cracks? How does this all fall apart? Let's get into how this whole system breaks down in the real world, turning these powerful laws into, well, paper tigers. So the thing is, the problem isn't just one single issue. The folks who've studied this have pointed to 3 major hurdles that pretty much consistently stop the law from actually working on the ground. Let's break them down one by one. First up, there's a cultural challenge. Unlike something like theft or assault, wildlife crime just isn't always seen with the same seriousness. In some communities, hunting might even carry a bit of prestige. And maybe the public doesn't fully grasp the devastating impact these crimes have on the entire ecosystem. And that makes it way harder for people to report crimes, or even support the folks trying to enforce the law. Okay, hurdle number 2, and listen, this is a huge one. There's a massive legal loophole. Just look at this comparison. For the big, iconic species like tigers and elephants, the law is tough. The offenses are cognizable, non-bailable, meaning you can be arrested without a warrant and you're not getting out on bail. But for almost every other wildlife offense, the crimes are bailable and, crucially, compoundable. And what does that mean? It means offenders can get out on bail no problem and then just settle the case by paying some compensation. They can literally buy their way out of any real trouble.
And just as the research points out, allowing these crimes to be settled with a payment creates, and I'm quoting here, a massive loophole in the act. It sends this terrible message that these crimes aren't really that serious. For traffickers, it just becomes a business expense, another cost of doing business, which totally undermines the whole point of having a deterrent in the first place.
And that brings us to the third hurdle, procedural failures. This is about the human factor. The forest officers who are actually supposed to prosecute these cases, well, they're often not lawyers. They just don't have the legal training to build a strong case, from collecting evidence the right way to navigating complex court proceedings. And to make matters worse, think about the witnesses. Local people who see something often don't show up to testify, and why would they? The system doesn't give them a single taka to cover their travel costs or the wages they lose for the day. And it's not just the human factor. The system itself is buckling under the strain. The courts are totally overwhelmed with cases. And get this, there's no central database for wildlife offenders,
So a criminal who gets caught in one part of the country can just move to another and be treated like a first-time offender all over again. The result of all this? A really, really low conviction rate, which basically just emboldens criminals and tells them the odds are completely in their favor.
So yeah, it's a pretty bleak picture, but it's not hopeless. The same research that lays out all these problems also gives us a clear, really practical roadmap for how to start fixing things and closing that massive gap between the law on paper and what happens in reality.
And the recommendations are really smart. They're targeted and systemic. Things like creating specialized wildlife courts to handle these cases, establishing a web-based central crime database, just like the police have, and absolutely crucially, closing that giant loophole by making more of these offenses non-bailable and non-compoundable. There's even a fascinating recommendation to give courts suo motu power, which is a fancy way of saying they could start cases on their own without even waiting for someone to file a complaint.
And the stakes here are not theoretical. They are very, very real, and they're happening right now. For example, in June 2024, the international body CITES actually suspended Bangladesh's permit for the commercial bird trade. Why? Because of these exact regulatory failures we're talking about. That's a direct economic hit and a blow to the country's reputation. It shows there are real-world consequences to not getting this right.
But look, it's not just about changing laws and building databases. It's also about empowering people. Real reform means giving specialized legal training to those Forest Department officials. It means introducing allowances so witnesses can actually afford to show up and testify. It means developing alternative ways for communities who depend on the forest to make a living. And, of course, launching big public awareness campaigns so everyone, from the cities to the villages, understands just how much is at stake.
Which leaves us with this one big pressing question. Bangladesh has already done the hard part of putting one of the world's strongest wildlife acts on paper. The challenge now is to make those words mean something in practice. Can the nation bridge this huge gap between its ambitions and the reality on the ground before it's too late? The answer to that is going to determine the future of its absolutely incredible